Alec Baldwin arriving for jury selection in his manslaughter trial for the death of cinematographer Halyna Hutchins. Baldwin's wife, Halyna Baldwin, and one of their 7 young children arrived with them. Mr. Baldwin, would you like to say anything this morning? How are you feeling? I take a look at what happened during jury selection and what you can expect from this Hollywood trial. I'm Angenette Levy, and this is Crime Fix, coming to you from the courthouse in Santa Fe, New Mexico, where Alec Baldwin's manslaughter trial is now underway. Actor Alec Baldwin arrived at the courthouse this morning with his lawyers, of course, and his wife, Halyna Baldwin, and they had a baby with them. It was one of their 7 children. That child was then handed off to a woman. The baby actually started crying and seemed quite upset. She was faced with a number of cameras. Now, some people may say that this was all for the media. It might have been some type of PR move to garner sympathy from the jury, from the public, from anybody who may be watching. Neither of the Baldwins answered any of my questions. Mrs. Baldwin, anything to say this morning? Mrs. Baldwin? Alec Baldwin's brother, Stephen Baldwin, also an actor, is also at the courthouse to show support for his brother. 70 prospective jurors were summoned to the courthouse this morning, and things really got off to a late start. The air conditioning here in the courtroom was on the fritz, and everybody was too warm, and there was a delay in getting those 70 jurors checked in, so things did not start until well after 11 a.m. As things were delayed this morning, we actually heard from Alec Baldwin on Instagram. Take a look at this post. It says, Sheldon Whitehouse for Vice President. Sheldon Whitehouse is actually a U.S. Senator from Rhode Island. So that's all we've heard from Alec Baldwin. He must have been bored and posted on his Instagram account. Questioning of the prospective jurors started after 11 Mountain Time, as I mentioned, and 2 men said that they could not be impartial. One man said he had researched the case extensively, and another man said that he would be very biased against Alec Baldwin because he was familiar with union rules. That could become very important in this case because the Screen Actors Guild rules and safety warnings could become an issue when it comes to talking about gun safety on movie sets. Those 2 men were excused. Most of the jurors said they were familiar with Alec Baldwin. One woman, get this, actually said that she could not serve on the jury because she takes marijuana every morning, although she didn't do it this morning, she said, because she knew she would be driving, and that got quite a laugh from people in the courtroom. Another woman said that she's having a shoulder replaced this week, so she could not participate in jury service. The judge jokingly said to her, "Are you sure you don't want to stick around?" That also got a little bit of a laugh. Only 3 prospective jurors said that they had not heard about the Rust shooting case. Special Prosecutor Carrie Morrissey started by asking the pool about news coverage of the case. Most had seen the coverage. One woman said she had a decision about how she felt, but she could still listen and be fair. Now, before jury selection started on Monday, Alec Baldwin appeared in court for the first time during these proceedings for a day-long motion hearing. Judge Mary Marlowe Summer heard arguments on a number of issues. One of the more significant rulings, she determined the jury will not hear about Alec Baldwin's status as a producer on Rust. Prosecutors had argued that Baldwin being a producer meant that he was in charge, so he had more responsibility to ensure that the set was safe. But Judge Marlowe Summer said a prosecution expert wouldn't be allowed to testify about Baldwin being a producer because the expert wasn't qualified to do so, and she felt Baldwin's role as a producer wasn't relevant.
I'm going to revisit the producer. I'm going to make the following finding. I'm having real difficulty with the state's position that they want to show that as a producer he didn't follow guidelines, and therefore, as an actor, Mr. Baldwin did all these things wrong, resulting in the death of Halyna Hutchins, because as a producer, he allowed this all to happen. I think that when you look at the relevancy, I think that one of the reasons why I think I'm having a hard time wrapping my hand around it, to be able to say, Mr. Baldwin, because he was a producer and he was the boss, although there are more than one producer, and he couldn't do anything without, looking at those contracts, he couldn't do a thing without running it by, including hiring somebody, without running it by whatever that entity is in the contract. But I do not believe that it has any tendency to make more probable than it would be without the fact that Mr. Baldwin individually as an actor committed involuntary manslaughter through negligent use of a deadly weapon and the alternative theory. The probative value is not substantially outweighed by unfair prejudice and certainly confusion of issues to the jury. So I'm denying evidence of his status as a producer.
This case is a really, really tough one, and it just goes to show you that the world is not always the safest place. A lot of the cases I cover here on Crime Fix make it clear that the world is crazy and totally unpredictable. Life can change at any moment, and one of the scariest things that can happen to you is getting injured. That's why I want to talk to you about an amazing partner and sponsor of Crime Fix. It's Morgan & Morgan. This is a firm with more than 1,000 attorneys you may want in your corner because they are America's largest injury firm. And for a reason, they win a lot. And when I say they win a lot, they win a lot. They've secured multiple recent multi-million-dollar verdicts and settlements for victims who were in life-altering car crashes, all of which were considerably higher than the highest insurance offer. And one of the best things about Morgan & Morgan is how easy they make this whole process for their clients. Starting a claim takes 8 clicks or less, and it can all be done from your smartphone. And there are no upfront fees. You only pay them if you win. So if you're hurt, you can easily start a claim in 8 clicks or less. Just log on to forthepeople.com/crimefix. There was another ruling that went in favor of Alec Baldwin, and it involves Alessandro Pieta and how he can testify. He is seen here on the Muzzleloaders podcast last year. Pieta owns the firearms plant in Italy where the Colt 45 revolver was manufactured. Prosecutors wanted him to testify as an expert about the gun.
We have a made-up defense of the gun was modified, the gun wasn't functioning properly. There's not a single witness who is going to support that. Not a single witness, including the defendant himself. Yet, the defense is going to be put forth. If I don't call Mr. Pieta, we're going to find ourselves in closing arguments, and the defense is going to say to the jury, you don't know how this gun was manufactured. Maybe there was a mistake. You don't have any idea what condition it was when it left Italy. It could have left Italy in this condition, and then it made it to EMF, and then it made it to Mr. Kinney, and then it made it into poor Mr. Baldwin's hands, and it malfunctioned. That's what they're going to do. I can't let them, so I am bringing the man who owns the manufacturing company to testify.
But Alec Baldwin's attorneys argued that Pieta should not be allowed to testify as an expert witness.
2 things, Your Honor. That's exactly the concern we have about Mr. Pieta. He hasn't inspected the gun, hasn't reviewed the gun reports. To look at a picture of a gun he saw 7 years ago and to say, I think the damage occurred this way, that is not reliable expert testimony. He hasn't inspected it. He has no idea the conditions under which it was used, the conditions of the FBI testing.
The court makes the following ruling. The court finds that Mr. Pieta is properly a fact witness. He's not an expert witness. He can testify to his knowledge of the gun before it left the factory. He can say it was a functioning gun if he tested it at that time. I think that you want the court to follow down the meander of strong functioning gun. He's not going to say strong. He's going to say that it was functioning, and I think that the creation or origination of that gun, for purposes of what Ms. Morrissey said, that so that in closing it's quelled with respect to where's, in so many words, how do we know it was looking good when it got manufactured? So he comes in, but his testimony is going to end to his knowledge of when it left the factory. He can't testify. He just learned that it was broken by somebody told him the FBI broke it, and all he can say is, yeah, it's broken.
The bottom line on the ruling from the judge, Alessandro Pieta can testify as a fact witness about the condition of the revolver, but not as an expert. Now, Rust is a movie set, so of course cameras were rolling constantly. So there's a lot of video of Alec Baldwin handling guns on the set. We saw some clips of that during Hannah Gutierrez Reed's trial. Here's one of those clips.
Well, let me show you something. Hold on. Step back to your original mark. So 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, I'm getting up. Right. Then when he drops his arm, Halyna get out, he drops his arm, that means Brady's close. I'm going to start to really get up.
Alec Baldwin is directing people on set, almost using that gun as a pointer, telling people what to do.
One more. I forgot to recall stuff. No, right away. Let's reload. Here we go.
Judge Marlo Summer issued this decision about those videos on Monday.
Any of the videos or any evidence or pictures which relate to Mr. Baldwin not handling or that goes to the defendants, the gun didn't work, and they're showing that it did work because he's shooting videos that show that he's cocking the gun when he doesn't need to cock the gun, goes to the negligent use of a deadly weapon. However, everything else regarding him yelling at the crew or telling people to hurry up, none of that is relevant, and that is propensity evidence. So I think that you all can look at the videos, look at any of those exhibits, and agree which ones meet my ruling. And if you can't do that, then I'll have to help you out. Okay?
And of course, the jury will hear a lot about firearms safety on movie sets during this trial. The prosecution's argument is that Alec Baldwin caused Halyna Hutchins' death by his negligence. Brian Carpenter, a firearms safety expert, testified about who's at fault when a gun discharges accidentally.
Are you aware, based on the review of the documents and the materials in this case, are you aware that there were, I think what you're referring to as negligent discharges?
Yes.
Okay. And are you also aware that with regard to those negligent discharges, Ms. Gutierrez was not in control of those weapons at the moment?
It is my understanding, yes.
Okay. So, if there's a negligent discharge on a movie set, ultimately, who's responsible for that?
It would be the armorer's responsibility. Now, obviously, that blame also can be split with whoever created the negligent discharge, but if you create an environment for the ND to occur, then the blame is on the armorer and on the person who actually had the negligent discharge. So it's a double-sided coin there.
And one of the prosecution's star witnesses will be Dave Halls. Dave Halls was the first assistant director who was supposed to check the gun's cylinder to ensure it was safe. He pleaded guilty to a misdemeanor charge related to his negligence.
She opened up the latch to the revolver. I recall seeing 3 to 4 what I believe to be dummy rounds. I had seen the dummy rounds before.
But sir, let me ask you, you indicated that you only saw 3 or 4, you didn't see 6.
I don't recall her fully rotating the cylinder.
Okay. You don't recall her fully rotating it?
I do not.
Okay. And even though the cylinder wasn't fully rotated, did you let that safety check sort of pass?
I did.
Halls testified that Hannah Gutierrez Reed, the armorer, handed Alec Baldwin the gun and then explained what he said happened after that.
She took the few steps to Mr. Baldwin and gave Ms. Baldwin the gun.
Okay. To the best of your recollection, Ms. Gutierrez hands the gun to Mr. Baldwin. Walk us through what happens after that.
The revolver is placed. Mr. Baldwin had a holster that the gun was basically at his chest, and his action was to take the gun out and point it at what had been the 2 U.S. Marshals, and he was pulling it out. I'm sure he was getting used to that action. He was in communication with Miss Hutchins about where to point the gun.
Do you recall, sir, was Mr. Souza also in the room?
He was.
Was Mr. Souza also participating in how to set up this shot? Do you recall?
No, I just recalled that it was communication between Mr. Baldwin and Halyna.
Okay. And then what happened?
The gun went off.
Halls will likely be grilled by Alec Baldwin's defense team about his version of events and his handling of that firearm.
After you admittedly do an improper check of the firearm, isn't it true that you handed that firearm to Mr. Baldwin?
It's not true.
Do you know that your account conflicts with Mr. Baldwin's?
I am aware of that.
And do you know that it conflicts with Ms. Gutierrez-Reed?
I am aware of that, but however, in Mr. Baldwin's initial statement with Detective Hancock, a few hours after the incident on October 21st, when asked the question who handed him the gun, he said Hannah did, like she always did.
And after that, he changed and said you had handed it to him, right?
Yes.
Other eyewitnesses will also testify, like Ross Adiego.
I think Joel, the director, and Alec had some brief conversation back and forth about what the goal was for that shot, and I think Alec had drawn it once to kind of audition what he thought his action should be for Joel, and then he drew it again, and it went off. And, instantly, a firearm went off in a small wooden church. So the concussion, ears ringing, that moment of panic in everybody. I think the first person I made eye contact with was Halyna, who was clearly injured by whatever that gunshot was, that noise we had just heard. And in fact, she was starting to go flush, and I think holding her right side, and then I think that Joel let out some sort of scream or made some noise that, to indicate he was also injured. And I think I just my attention went to Joel because he was the closest to me. I think I recall Reed and Serge moving Pew out of the way to help Halyna get to basically to lay Halyna down and start tending to her, figure out what her injuries were, or injury. And I started attending to Joel. I think I yelled out that if you can't help us, get the out of here. And someone called 911.
And of course, Director Joel Souza, who was also wounded, will also take the stand.
Okay. So explain to us when you're going into the church and why and what you do and what happens.
So I went inside again to try to see what the angle was. There were a lot of voices. I heard Alec's voice. I heard Halyna's voice. Everyone sort of talking at once. I don't have a clear memory of how long I was standing behind her. I know I got up behind her to try to see on the monitor, and there was an incredibly loud bang that was not like the half and quarter loads you hear on a set. Those are they're loud poofs and pops. This was deafening. And it felt like somebody had taken a baseball bat to my shoulder. I remember that distinctly, and sort of stumbling back and shouting. I don't remember exactly what I said.
Were you able to see Ms. Hutchins at that time?
I did. I remember sort of stumbling back, and I either fell to my knees or I was sitting, and I distinctly remember her being lowered to the ground. people had her sort of by either side. And I still didn't quite know what had happened. Nothing made sense. I remember initially thinking, had she been startled by it? And they were sitting her down as a result, and then I saw the blood on her back.
And to the best of your recollection, what happened after that?
It got very chaotic. I remember them laying me down. I remember them laying her down next to me. Although we were sort of facing in opposite directions, my head was this way, her head was that way. I remember a lot of panic. I still just couldn't figure out what had happened. I thought, was there something that had been stuck in the barrel that came out? But just nothing made sense.
But really the big question is, will Armorer Hannah Gutierrez-Reed testify? She's on both sides' witness list, and Gutierrez-Reed has indicated she would not cooperate with the prosecution. But there's an order to transport her from the women's prison in New Mexico to the county jail in Santa Fe for the trial. So is she going to testify? Is something being worked out behind the scenes that we don't know about? Gutierrez-Reed is asking to be released immediately from prison, and she's asking for a new trial, claiming she was denied a fair trial when a final firearms expert report wasn't turned over to her defense team. In watching the arguments and reading the documents, you can really tell that there is no love lost between the prosecution and the defense teams in this case. In fact, some of that contention seems to stem from things that happened when the special prosecutor says she offered Alec Baldwin a plea deal in this case. That plea deal would not have required Alec Baldwin to serve 1 day in jail. Special prosecutor Carrie Morrissey said she believed Alec Baldwin was going to accept that plea deal, but as a distraction, he was going to file a lawsuit on the same day he pleaded guilty against the first prosecution team. Morrissey said in an April court filing that that did not cause her to retract the deal, even though she found the tactic distasteful. But Morrissey said she withdrew that plea offer after undersigned counsel received information that Mr. Baldwin commissioned his own documentary about the death of the woman he killed and was actively pressuring witnesses in the case to submit to interviews for his documentary. So that's some of what you can expect when the testimony in this case gets underway. I'm Angenette Levy, and that's it for this episode of Crime Fix from the courthouse here in Santa Fe, New Mexico. I'll see you back here next time.